Help support the show by joining the Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. Also, hit that like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content. Hey, what's up? Welcome to QnA, the show where I take your questions and answer them here in video format. As always, if you want your questions to be answered on the show, make sure you're subscribed and notified so that when I post the question prompt, you see it and you get to ask your questions. So that all being said, let's just jump into it. We're going to start with a question from Rome. And Rome says this: I don't remember too much about last year's preseason. How did they look last year compared to this year? What are some differences? Now, I'm operating straight off memory. I could be wrong here. But my memory of last year's preseason was that it was a dreadful experience. Now, you have to remember the Browns were significantly less physical at practice last year, which I was highly critical of at the time. Also, the Browns played significantly less rotational players in last year's preseason, I believe, than they are right now. It's not like they're playing a ton right now, but so I put up some Pro Football Focus numbers just to kind of put in context how bad the Browns were in the preseason last year. So last season in the preseason, the Browns were the 25th lowest graded team in the NFL. If we look at passing offense, how bad were they? They weren't that bad passing offense-wise, but they were, 16th in offense total. This is still, 2024, 16th in offense total. Pass blocking was abysmal. They were 26 in pass blocking. And let me see where they ranked in defense that year. Oh, they were 32nd in PFF grade in defense in 2024. 2025, the Browns are the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So they're in the top 10 in overall grade. So they're 12 in overall grade. Passing offense is 14th. Pass blocking, still not where you want it at 23, according to Pro Football Focus at least. Run game, they're number 4 in run game on Pro Football Focus this preseason. And in defense, they are number 7. So you could just tell, Pro Football Focus grades aren't an exact science, and they're really more advertisements than everything. But it's a good approximation of something like the preseason of like how the team's looking, or at least how the players who are out there are looking. Last year, the preseason, I remember being pretty dreadful. Whoever the Browns put out there, it wasn't very impressive. There was really very little to be encouraged about after these games as well. It was a tough watch. It was certainly a tough watch. I remember talking about that during the preseason and just really wanting the Browns to do something positive at some point in the preseason, because I remember the first 2 games were especially void of positives. And then I think the last game had some things to be excited about. And I remember just being like thrilled that happened. So yeah, I think this is a world of difference from last year's preseason to this year's preseason. Don't know what that means for the regular season. It could mean a lot, could mean nothing, but it certainly feels better to live through. You know what I mean? Brandon Wine says, can you give me an accurate assessment of the rookie quarterbacks? I think it's a win that both are looking good, long-term starter and backup possibilities, but compare who they played, and what they did, first downs, yards, scores. Be honest, if there were no names attached. So I think what each of the rookies especially proved were 2 different things, and things that affirmed their style of play. So what Dillon Gabriel went out there and looked like was somebody who can be a competent backup in the NFL offense, such as the Cleveland Browns, right? Not a ton of playmaking, but whatever was there, the layups that were there to be made, he made those layups. He got to where the offense requires him to get to. He made the plays, that were there to be made. Was he able to create big plays like Shedeur was? No. Shedeur was able to create some big plays by working semi-outer structure. So I think that's what Dillon proved, right? He looked like somebody who could be a solid backup. Shedeur looks like somebody who has the potential to potentially be a starter, but there are still some things that he can do when he's out there to make his life a lot easier, right? Like the stuff that Dillon does that helped his life be easy. It's kind of the stuff that he gets criticized for, right? When he's hitting on stick, he's hitting the comeback on stick, and he gets like 7 yards on second down to get to a 3rd and short. That's the kind of stuff you also want to see Shedeur take advantage of, right? Because there were a couple of times where Shedeur had the opportunity to make his life a lot easier on 3rd down by just taking what's there and instead held the ball into a negative situation. So there's some of that there that Dillon does where it's like, okay, well, if you're not really relying on the quarterback position to move the offense and you're just kind of using the quarterback position as a vehicle to run your offense, then I think there is something that Dillon does provide that's more useful in a backup capacity right now than like Shedeur. But I do think Shedeur's skill set overall is a lot more compelling when you're talking about somebody who's going to be a future starter, right? No guarantees that either of these guys live up to either of those billings, but I don't really see these two as going for the same thing. I know that they're going for the same thing, but in my mind, I see Dillon as a future backup, and I see Shedeur as a long-term project for the Browns to maybe develop a starter. Like it's a flyer on a developmental guy that they feel like can potentially develop into a starter if they do things right. So I know it's real easy to just like get caught up in comparing these two. I like apples to apples, but it's not apples to apples. It's apples to oranges. I think that they're asked to do two different things. I think the Browns are going to try to get two different things out of these guys. And I just don't think it's the most, like, I think Dillon and Shedeur can coexist on the same roster together for quite some time, right? Whether that be Shedeur being Dillon's backup or Dillon's being Shedeur's backup, which I think is probably the more likely scenario. But they can coexist, right? I don't think these two are really at odds with each other in the same way that like Kenny Pickett and Joe Flacco are in my mind. All right, so the next question comes from Big Griff, who says this. Yo, Q, what should we expect from Mike Hall Jr. in his second year? Also, what are some of the college players, QBs and non-QBs, that we should keep an eye on for the draft? Caleb Downs, if you're talking about non-QBs, there's a lot of guys. I'll bring on JP soon so we can talk about all those guys, no doubt. Quarterbacks, the big three right now feels like it's that everybody is giving all the preseason hype to. Francisco Mendoza, he plays at Indiana. He's a transfer from Cal. Then there is Lenore Sellers at South Carolina, and then Cade Klubnik at Clemson. I think that's who everybody's like predicting is going to be in that top three. It's very, very, very volatile, though. Like, I'm just going to tell you this right now. It's very likely that the three quarterbacks that are going to be at the top of this draft this year could very likely be completely different than those three names that I named. We're really not going to know about this year's draft class until like 8 weeks into the college season. Once we get there, we'll start to be able to formulate what that draft class even looks like. But trying to do that right now is just such a pointless endeavor because we don't know anything. Like, think about it like this. Joe Burrow was the number one pick in, I believe, the 2020 draft. But if you go to the 2020 offseason, August of 2020, and you would have told somebody in August of 2020 that Joe Burrow would be the undoubted number one overall pick, you would have been called an idiot. Nobody thought that was going to happen, right? You know, Joe Burrow's first year at LSU certainly didn't indicate he'd be a number one overall pick. Like, you would be called all kind of names, an incredible, like, it would have been so unbelievable, the idea a year in August of 2020 that Joe Burrow would be the number one overall pick. Well, not, was it the 2020 draft or was it 2019? Somebody correct me. But basically, if you go to the August of the football season that Joe Burrow had that tremendous year at LSU and told somebody he'd be the number one overall pick, hell, if you told Joe Burrow he'd be the number one overall pick, he'd probably be like, oh, shut up, right? Like, you're playing a prank on me. And that's just kind of how it goes sometimes, right? You know, it could be like Sam Levitt or somebody random like that plays so good that they become the number one overall pick, or Garrett Nussmeier, or, you know, somebody we're not even thinking about, Aiden Childs at Michigan State could have that kind of a season. You know, it could be completely random, you know. So don't think just because you heard these three names in August that those are the names that have to be good in order for the quarterback class to be good. Keep an open mind that, you know, somebody can arrive late to this class and take it over completely. Now, it's probably not going to be Joe Burrow levels, right? Because that kind of a rise has literally never happened before and probably won't happen very often after. But it is something to think about, right? When we're really focused on, who's going to be the number one overall pick. Hell, last August, people were convinced that Carson Beck was going to be the number one overall pick. And then it ended up being Cam Ward, who, like, wasn't until halfway through the college season that people even entertained the thought of that. So, yeah. I say all of this to say, don't nobody know who going to be at the top of this draft, dog. Don't nobody know right now. We are so far away from it that it's impossible to tell. Ref Bump, so that must be a wrestling fan, says, do you think Fanon Jr. can get used as a fullback in Wildcat in some goal line packages to take advantage of his diverse skill set? I'm sure he could. I don't see why they would do that. You know, if you want a fullback out there, I'm pretty sure you got multiple other offensive linemen that can do that a lot better than Harold Fanon Jr. And if you want to run a Wildcat, like, yeah, you could use Harold Fanon Jr., but, like, there are like 5 other guys that I think would be better for that role. If you want to use his diverse skill set, use him in the way that he showcased it at Bowling Green, right? Just put him in the slot, give him a different variety of routes to run, get the ball in his hands, give him some tight end screens. I don't think you have to get that creative to get the ball in Harold Fanon Jr.'s hands. You just gotta do what he does well. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think you can do it, but I just don't see why. Pink Bunny says, what would have happened in this season in order for you to consider it successful? I don't think a lot of people think this team will go over 500. I agree. So what are some things we can look for in order to get excited about this season? The number one thing that changes how you feel about a season is if you end a season with hope about the quarterback position for whatever reason, right? If you could have whatever record you have. If you end that season thinking to yourself, we're about to have a quarterback, or, oh man, I think we found our quarterback, I don't care what the record was, you're going to consider that season a success. Like Baker Mayfield's first year, where people were pretty convinced after it in 2018, myself included, that Baker was going to be the guy and be the answer finally at quarterback. They were under 500 that year, right? So, like, but we consider 2018 a pretty successful year to look back on. That's kind of the same exact thing here, right? If you end up with a pick and, like, it's an Andrew Luck draft, and then you get the number one overall pick and there's an answer at quarterback, you're going to be excited no matter what the record was. You're not going to be that mad about it, right? If you end the season and Shedeur Sanders looks like he's going to be ready to take off next year, you're going to be excited about this season, right? So, number one, right, in order to consider a successful season, if you feel better about quarterback at the end of this season than you did at the start of it, then that's going to be a successful season. No doubt in my mind, right? Obviously, you want to see stuff from the other young players, but I think that's the number one marker for a successful season. What the team's record is, if it coincides with really good quarterback play, obviously that enhances things. But if you end the season feeling really good about one of these quarterbacks on your roster or a quarterback you have a clear path to go get in the draft, then you're going to feel like this season was a success, right? That's really the number one thing. Then you can add in, you want to see some good signs from your young players, your draft class guys, and you want to feel like this team isn't that far away, right? So competitive games, some interesting wins, all those things thrown in there as well. So that's kind of, I think, how success would be felt by the fan base. Iceman the Boss says, Q, do you think the Browns rep will impact the suspension lengths at all? I worry that public perception of this organization impacting decisions from the league. Well, the good news, and some might say bad news in this situation, is that the public does not suspend players in the NFL. The public has no say in what the NFL does in their suspension policy. The NFL has to say in that, and the Browns are a part of the NFL. I promise you, they're not going to act unfair to the Cleveland Browns in the process in which the Browns are also funding as one of 32 teams in the league. So, no, I don't think the Browns' reputation is going to really impact whatever suspension lengths they get, because the Browns' reputation, I know people have kind of gotten a bit sensational about it, but the Browns' reputation right now is not that different from a lot of other NFL teams' reputations, right? The Ravens have the same funk on them. The Bengals had similar funks on them, right? The Kansas City Chiefs, you go through every Andy Reid roster, you're going to find like a million cases on those rosters. So, yeah, the Browns, are they getting the cleanest rep in the NFL right now? No, obviously not, and they deserve to not have the cleanest rep in the NFL right now. But is that really going to impact the NFL when the rest of how the NFL views the Browns and tries to punish them when every other NFL team has the exact same thing going on with their rosters? Probably not, right? Probably not. The next question I'm going to get into is from Aaron, who says, is Dylan Gabriel's player comp closer to Baker Mayfield or Tua Tagovailoa? It's interesting that people went to Tua with him. And I think it's only because he's left-handed and he's Polynesian. If we keeping it a buck, I believe he's Polynesian. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. Dylan Gabriel is not Polynesian. I know he is from Hawaii, but that doesn't necessarily guarantee the truth. But y'all, if y'all know what Dylan Gabriel's nationality is, let me know. Dylan Gabriel, I don't think he reminds me that much of Tua as a player, other than being left-handed and kind of small. Dylan Gabriel reminds me more of Case Keenum. It's like in a bottle. He's like a shorter version of 2020 Baker at times, with how much zip he can put on the ball, but obviously not as good as 2020 Baker. He's more of a Case Keenum, which was basically a less talented Baker Mayfield. So, yeah, I would say Case Keenum. Better arm strength than Case Keenum. I think he puts more zip on it. But less talented Baker Mayfield is where I would go with him. And when he throws it, there's sometimes even when he has these mishaps with his mechanics, I get reminded of the same shit that used to happen with Baker with him. But obviously, Baker much more talented, much more arm strength. Much more, similarly athletic, but a bigger body, so able to kind of break out of tackles more often, and much better at times in his career doing stuff out of structure, which I think Dylan has really struggled with. Your boy Corey says, do you truly believe an elite quarterback is necessary to compete in the NFL at a high level? I mean, what are we defining as elite? I think is a big part of that question, right? Because if you're saying elite is the best 5 quarterbacks in the NFL, then I think it's obvious you don't need the best 5 quarterbacks in the NFL to compete. You need competence at the quarterback position, but you don't need elite at the quarterback position. And this has been proven time and time again, where quarterbacks who aren't playing at an elite level have won the Super Bowl multiple times. You need competent quarterback play. And more than anything, and I think this is the part that so many people miss, and I'm going to explain why I think this happens, but I think the thing you need the most is not just competent quarterback play, but you need competent quarterback play that is consistent. Because the NFL playoff system is single elimination, which means you lose a game, you're out. You have to win 4 games most often to win a Super Bowl in a row against some of the best competition that the league has to offer in conditions that aren't great, oftentimes. You need a quarterback who can consistently, at worst, be competent. Like, you get one bad game in a playoff run for most quarterbacks. Every other time, you got to be at least competent. And I think that part gets forgotten because there's a lot of quarterbacks who have such high ceilings and are such great players, but aren't the most consistent. I mean, you could look at like Lamar Jackson is an example of this. Peyton Manning was an example of this, where like his consistency, obviously he was able to do great things, but consistency was always an issue with him. And that ended up biting him in the ass a couple of times in the playoffs, right? Because you throw a 4-interception game at the wrong time and it's a single elimination tournament. That's it, right? Consistency, I think, is the number one trait you want from a quarterback. Obviously, there is a level of play that you have to reach for your consistency to matter. Like, I could be an NFL quarterback, but I'd be consistently terrible. That's not going to help anybody win in the playoffs, right? But if you can get to a level to where you can be competent, run an NFL offense at a competent level, but also be consistent, then yeah, I think you can win a championship with that guy. I think that is the biggest question with every quarterback. And if you look at quarterbacks who have been able to do it, consistently able to be competent at worst, right? You look at the quarterbacks who have struggled, your Jared Goffs of the world, right? Your Jimmy Garoppolo's back in the day of the world, they struggle to have that consistency. And I think that's important. Like, I think people get too fixated on what people can be at their peaks and don't really focus on what people are at their averages. And if you peak here, but, well, not average, but mode, right? Most often, if you peak here, but you're not able to be consistent for 4 weeks, you're probably going to have a down spike at some point in the playoffs, and that's going to hurt your team. So consistency, it's the biggest thing. It really is. I think people sleep on it. But that's my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.